Welcome. I'm going to share a little video here with you on just the basic output of Java. So one of the first things we want to learn about, and this is in section 1.1, is the two print statements that we'll use throughout the year. So there's system out print line. That's a lowercase l right there, ln. We often read that as print line. And then there's its counterpart, system out print. So I'm also going to show you a few things here about commenting Java code. So this replit, typically when you open up replit, what you're going to see is just that starter line there, system out print line, hello world. And if you were to just start right there, nothing else present, and click run, over to the right in what we call the console log, we'll see the words hello world appear. So that's the effect of a system out print line, is that it's going to cause whatever text is inside to appear in this little area right here. Notice that the quotes don't appear. That's part of what we call the container. This is referred to as a string literal. There's a lot going on here. One of the things that's going to be frustrating at the start of the year is we're not going to learn the answer to everything. It's going to be kind of revealed slowly throughout the year. So like later in the year, we'll learn, why is this word static here? Why is this public? What does void mean? But if we were to try to cover everything at once, it'd be really bizarre, and there's a lot of unknowns at this point. So we kind of jump right in, get started, and fill in those blanks throughout the year. So today we're just trying to see the effect of system out print line and system out print. So I've added some more code here, and I've shared this with you, by the way, so you can open this replit on your end and experiment as well. If I run this right now, we'll see 3 lines of text appear. We'll see hello world. We'll see string literal, which I mentioned earlier. That's the technical name for what we see here inside of the quotes. And then I just said, notice that the quotes don't print. Okay, and you'll also notice that there's a blank line between these 2 lines of text, because I included this extra system out print line right here, which didn't print a string literal, but it did cause the cursor to move down a line. So below here, I've done a couple of things. This double slash right here, that's what makes this called a comment. If I remove those 2 slashes and I run the program again, now we'll notice that the words "and I ran" appear on the screen as well. The reason those didn't appear earlier is because I had commented off that line of code. What that means is that it's not actually read by the compiler. Usually we use comments to either maybe turn something off because it's causing a mistake and we want to try to fix it, or there's a block of code we're not ready to run yet, or sometimes we just put in notes for other people. So for example, at the top of my program, I could even do something like this. I could say something, like author Brian Zerla, and put like some notations in here. I could put the date, put the classroom, all kinds of things. So that code would not be read. It's not going to affect anything. You can't put a mistake in there because it's not even noticed by the computer. So if I went through and I uncommented these remaining lines of code, they should all print as well. Although something a little weird is going to happen, we'll notice. With my first several prints, I was using the print line method. Each line of output appeared on its own line. In my second sequence of prints, I didn't do that. I used the print method. So what's the difference? Well, the print line method, at the end of its print, drops the cursor to a new line. And it's important to note that that happens at the end of the print, not at the beginning. The print method, when we don't put the ln, doesn't drop this cursor. It actually just leaves the cursor there, and you can see it kind of smushed it together. So there's not actually a space like between the word ran and I, or if we come over here between away and I, and so on. All of those lines just got smushed together into one single line of output. So if I wanted them to appear on their own lines, I would have to make these print line methods. And, you might want to play around with this a little bit, maybe see what happens if you make like some of the methods a print line. What happens if, not all of them are. This should drop everything onto its own line of text. If I came back and I removed, say, just one of them from the middle, let's say I took this one, from the middle out right here. Well, what should happen is at the end of this line, the cursor would drop. So I just ran would appear on its own line, but after I just ran prints, then the cursor wouldn't drop. We should see this word ran sort of link up with that word I, and it will all appear on one line, just those two prints. Okay. So sometimes you want to use print, sometimes you want to use print line, and you need to be able to differentiate between what's going to occur when you use either of those two print methods. All right. And down here, I use something called a block rem or a block comment. This /* means that all of my code will be commented out until we encounter the 2-character sequence */. Okay. So once you put in a /*, everything gets ignored until you close that comment off. Okay. With the slash after the asterisk. All right. Well, I intentionally put some mistakes here in this code. Every line of code has one error in it. And unfortunately, once you get a kind of a single error in your code, it can actually prevent everything from working properly. So right now, some of those original prints that we were seeing earlier, they're not even running. Even though the first 9 lines of code I have are fine, these errors that I have beneath it are preventing what we call the compiler check. So Java has a 2-stage error detection. There's like the compiler side and the run side. And if you have a mistake on the compiler side, nothing's going to work. And that's what I'm looking at here. So what are the mistakes that I have? Well, one thing you'll notice is that pretty much everything in Java is lowercase. The only time typically, this is not really a hard set rule, but typically we use uppercase letters when we make class names, like the name of my class here was main. Replit actually requires that, okay? And about the only other time we'll see capital letters outside of string literals where we can put anything we want is on a user-defined class. Other users through the years have made lots of classes in Java in addition to this one here that I just made. Years ago, somebody made a class called string, and we're using that here, and it was made with a capital S, and system's similar. That's why it has a capital S. And in fact, that's how I made a mistake in this first line of code, is I should have put a capital S on that line system. That was line 19. I don't see that in the error detection here, although sometimes it's a little funny how it finds certain errors and not others. Okay, but that was one of my mistakes. You probably noticed too how all of these program statements end in a semicolon. So that's a rule in Java. All program statements have to end in a semicolon. The exception would be things like when you're declaring the class and when you're declaring what we call a method. We're going to learn a lot more about that later. But for now, you can kind of think like anytime you're going to open up a brace container, you don't put a semicolon like immediately before it, so it wouldn't go at the end of that line of code. Okay. This is a container right here. Anytime we have that open brace, it's going to have to later be followed by a closing brace. All right. Now in the middle, these are the statements. They have to end in semicolons. So see here on line 20, I forgot my semicolon. And that was actually showing up here in my error detection. It told me that a semicolon was expected at the end of line 20. Okay, here's another mistake I made. Right here, I didn't put the double quotation marks around hello world. We'll learn later that that means the computer has to think that those are variables, and I haven't created any variables yet. So right now, we're only capable of printing what we call a string literal. That's all we've learned about. By the way, sometimes Replit tries to anticipate your next move. You'll notice right there, I only hit the double quotation mark once, and it actually gave me a double. And it's a little bit frustrating sometimes because if I hit backspace once, it actually took out both of them. If I want to put that in there, again, it doubled it up. I'm probably going to have to use the delete key or some other sequence to get rid of just one of them. And that can be a little bit frustrating. So, all right, I now have put quotes around that. Okay. I've got my parentheses set up. In addition to that, I have my semicolon. I've got the capital S. All right, what's wrong in this last line? Well, this was kind of silly. I forgot to put the word out right there. So I know, again, it's a little bit weird. Why did we write system out print line? We're going to learn more about that sequence throughout the year, what those periods are for, the access, we call that. But for now, just remember we have two methods that we're using. We have system out print and we have system out print line. And unfortunately, it's got to be perfect. Java just doesn't allow like little mistakes. So you got to have the capital S. You got to spell everything properly. You need to use, print or print line. It has to be a lowercase L right there. There's so many little things that can go wrong, and it's going to be really frustrating when you first start coding. Everybody goes through this regardless of the language. So like maybe you've coded in HTML before or something. It's the same exact thing where like it's case sensitive and all the little things matter. And so we've got to always watch out for those little mistakes. Sometimes the compiler will set you off in the direction of finding them, and other times it won't help so much. And just the more you do it, the better you get at it. So keep writing code. Just go ahead and, I'd say just try clearing out all of this, hit backspace, start from scratch, see if you can write 5 or 10 print lines and put your name in there, put your address, put a note to your friend, whatever, put some song lyrics, do something, but just get in the habit of typing system out print line with a capital S. Just doing those little things over and over. It actually adds up and you get pretty good at it, and you start catching your mistakes, and you notice all the little, nuances of the language.